founder of the Queendom NYC, Charisma the Queen, and I'm here with Gyro Web TV, and we're talking about life.
What's going on? It's your boy Jay Everyday here with Everyday Talk with Everyday People. I have a wonderful guest sitting here with me today. And introduce yourself, Corrine.
Hi, I'm Corrine, Charisma the Queen, and I am the CEO and founder of the Queendom NYC, all about changing the narrative of Black women.
Beautiful, beautiful. We love Black women.
You want to.
So help us to learn who is Corrine.
I guess, it's interesting you asked that because in my 40s, I'm now figuring that out, right? If you would have asked me that a couple of years ago, I would have told you I'm a mom of 6. I'm a director of a nonprofit. I work with the people, mental health supports, and, everything about me was predicated about everything around me. Whereas now, asking me who I am right now, I am fun, I am sleepy, I am looking to fulfill my purpose in life. And so if you ask me who I am, I'm evolving. And I think that's what I've learned is that that's kind of what we all need to be doing. Instead of needing to be defined, who are you? Become you. Every day, perpetually.
I like that word, every day. In the midst of all that, from who you are now, are you happy?
I'm grateful.
Okay.
I'm just grateful to be here because I understand that a combination between decisions and circumstances had prescribed that I shouldn't be here or not be here in the capacity I am.
Okay.
Most Black women endure so much from childhood, and abuse and molestation and self-esteem. Now we're like at this place where it's like, yeah, wear your afro, don't comb your hair, it's great,
right.
Be natural. When I was a little girl, perm started at 4 and 5.
Okay. Hot comb.
Hot comb. That was a ritual, and so self-identification for a Black woman is always been a struggle. And so growing up as a Black girl, it's a different experience in owning that experience, right? And so it can lead you down a lot of negative roads. For me, I've had this conundrum of experiences where I was able to go to Historical Black College on a scholarship. I was able to complete my bachelor's degree, complete my master's degree.
So you mentioned that you went to Historical Black College. How do you feel that shaped the development of you as a woman today?
I definitely feel like Historically Black colleges are integral in us having an opportunity to have a level playing field.
Okay.
And so in high school, I went to a predominantly white school. One of my best friends had a pool and a tennis court in our house. And so while I was struggling to have meals in my house and I was struggling to have a phone consistently, back in the day, nobody had a phone all the time, well, not in the hood. Anyway, so, those were my struggles. I was competing academically and athletically and, with the extracurriculars with children who had the world at their feet.
Right.
And they didn't understand the difficulty of, okay, we're playing volleyball, y'all are gonna push your hair back into a ponytail, I'm gonna need some gel. The struggle was different.
Right.
And when I got to Historically Black College, it gave me the opportunity to really develop without the presets of economics I just got to rise to who I was without having to worry about who I was.
Got you. So the experience in high school, you got to see how much harder you had to work, how much more difficult it was to work. Did it show you appreciation for the little or the less that you had at home?
I think that I always resented poverty.
Okay.
I resented poverty. I resented my conditions as a child. And at about 14, I got a full-time job because I understood that nobody was going to give me anything. So while I was an honor student, I also worked full-time. At one point working 2 jobs. I was a thespian. I was in all-state chorus. I was a DECA member and I did national competitions. I was a national debater. And so I had all these extracurricular things because I needed external things to validate me, right? I didn't feel validated at home. I didn't feel validated within myself. I come from a very mixed background and my mother's very fair. She's not Black. She's Trini.
Okay.
But you know, Trini women, she's Chinese and Venezuelan and Native American, and so I have this woman that I'm looking at that doesn't look like me, right? And so I felt less than. I'm darker, my hair is different, my nose, and so I had to work double hard.
Right.
In my mind, I was always at a deficit at home and in the world. And so I always knew that life required more from me.
Okay.
If I wanted to even show up and be competitive, I had to work harder.
Gotcha. So now, with hearing all that, at what point did you breathe? Because from 14 maybe till last week, you may have been working. And do you feel your childhood was stolen, shortened, missing?
Necessary.
Necessary?
It was necessary. You know, I look at all that I had to face as an adult. And if it wasn't for the pressure that I learned to live under as a child, I wouldn't have survived it.
Okay.
My fight came from being raised in an environment that wasn't conducive to children, right? And so with my parents, both teenage parents, right? And New York City, crack epidemic, it was a lot going on.
Right.
So for me to grow up in that environment, it taught me survival. It taught me responsibility early. It taught me how to manifest, because it was a situation where it's like, if I don't get out there and get it, it ain't coming to me.
Gotcha. Would you have it any other way? Looking back?
I feel as though I can't describe if I would have it any other way.
Okay.
How can you take out any part of you and still be you?
I don't think you can.
You can't.
I think you can just add more pain. Because me, myself, as a writer, I write from the pain, I write from the experiences, and I listen to other people's stories like yourself. And I can create a movie, I can create a play, I can create any type of thing that you put on paper. Just take myself back to the moment, or put myself in your position, in your shoes. So you definitely don't want to take nothing away. I would definitely add more to it, more joy, more freedom, more happiness, and more experiences. You don't want to run away from what made you, what built you. The main thing is, it helps me parent better. I try not to put my two boys or let them go through anything I want to, but still give them the balance. You can have some pro kids, you can have some Jordans. I want you to appreciate them both.
I spoil my kids rotten.
Okay, ain't nothing wrong with that.
Well, I would say the parenting piece for me has been interesting, because I couldn't stop that ball from rolling.
Okay.
One issue that Black women are faced with, right, is fertility.
Okay.
Right, and so we've always been shamed for our fertility.
Okay.
And so the opposite of a white woman, where or a woman, not to say Black women don't have fertility issues, but when women have fertility issues, there's this outpouring of sympathy. Oh my gosh, you can't have a baby, you need, and when a woman is extremely fertile, like myself, oh, you didn't have cable, y'all don't have a TV. Like, no, I just don't want to kill all my kids.
Right.
And so because our circumstances don't look like the predicted circumstances that children should come into, we find ourselves ridiculed for birthing our children, which, spiritually, that's, no matter what the condition, that's what we're supposed to do, be fruitful and multiply. Well, I was a lot fruitful and I multiplied a lot,
Actually, what's the difference between the fruit basket and the fruit stand?
I would say, we got a garden.
I got you smile.
We got a garden.
Ain't nothing wrong with that. So, parenting, is it difficult raising each child differently, loving each child differently, and still loving them all as a whole? Because every child is different. Every child gets love and receives love differently. So how do you perform the task if you do that?
Oh, I do. It's interesting. My oldest son is a rapper, Honey Soul Blue, and he and I had a very difficult relationship in his teenage years.
Okay.
Because he wanted to be a rapper.
Okay.
And I'm like, you're an engineer. You can draw, you're good at math.
It could have been MC engineer.
Right, MC engineer. No, he wanted to be Honey Soul Blues trap star. And so I had to make a decision at about 16, when he was about 16, whether or not the relationship was important or me having my way was important.
Right.
And so what I discovered in myself was that The relationship is what's going to carry him through.
Mm-hmm.
If I disconnect because of my opinion or my stance of how I feel like his life should be,
Mm-hmm.
then I lose the ability to guide him.
Okay.
And so what I focused on was the relationship. And so we have this amazing relationship. He's FaceTime me like 2 or 3 times at this point because we usually speak to each other about a morning every day.
Yes.
He's like a best friend to me. And so that relationship had to be built and cultivated based on his terms. Because what I have to accept is that whether he goes to college or he doesn't,
Right.
he's still my person.
Mm-hmm.
He's still that guy that God gave me.
Okay.
And so I don't want to judge him.
Right.
I just want to be there to talk to. And I find that for me, the easiest way to get me to do something is just to have the relationship with me.
Right.
And if I could trust you, then I might listen to you.
Right.
So many parents are so belligerent about this is the way you should do it.
Right.
And especially as a single black mom, my expectations of my black son are not realistic.
Right.
Whereas my daughters, I got to model behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Who modeled that for him?
Right.
Where did he get his model from? And so at some point in time, I felt like his experience was a reflection of my parenting.
Okay.
And then I had to accept that my experience is not a reflection of my parents.
Right. So when you had that conversation with your son, did you take it to God before you?
I think I prayed him through, well, all of my children. I had to pray them through some of the hardest stuff because I didn't have the resources internally or externally to really support them. And it wasn't because I have a lack of know-how. I have master's degrees.
Right.
And so I'm reaching out for help and support, but those mental health and therapeutic models that help a teenager are not available in our community.
Right.
It's just not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to get on my face. And only a Christian who really has travailed understands what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
There were times that I would lay on my face and prostrate for my sons because I knew that the only person that could help them was God.
Right.
There was no more intervention as a mom I could do.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got on my face, God showed me that those generational curses
Right.
were broken with my children
Mm-hmm.
because of who I am.
Right.
And no matter what they face, it's never going to stop what God has for their life.
Amen.
It's never going to stop it. And so I was able to clearly identify, like the level of tragedy in my family is significant, right?
Okay.
And so I'm the only girl with 2 brothers, one younger and one older. The older was murdered when I was 17. The younger was shot 7 times when I was 22.
Mm.
Right? And so he still has life in his being, but he was never able to recover his full life.
Mm-hmm.
The trauma of just being shot 7 times.
Right.
And in the hood, we think of these as war stories, but we never look at the underlying effect
Mm-hmm.
of being shot 7 times.
Yeah.
So the expectation is, the war
Dust
story
that
is
off,
dust that off,
get back out there.
get back out there, go get a job, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's not realistic, right?
It's therapy.
And so I have 2 sons, and I saw them both going down the same kind of path. My father and his brother, one became a crack addict, and one was murdered in the streets. This is generation after generation in our families, and I said it has to stop with mine. But everything that I was seeing with my sons was showing me they're going down the same exact road, and it would predict that my oldest son should have been dead last year, and my youngest son is well on his way to getting shot. But I said, Jesus not gonna allow that. Okay? And it doesn't matter what it's looked like. I'm going to believe and have faith in God. And I got on my face and I prayed for my sons and I trusted God when I got up from there that I didn't have to worry about it anymore.
Right.
All I need to do was live a life that had actions that commanded respect and my children would follow.
Okay.
And it seems like it's going that direction. I do have a 17-year-old. He's trying to start his own Wu-Tang and stuff.
Wu-Tang Clan as far as music?
Yes.
Or Wu-Tang Clan
Yes.
for children?
Lord, no, I hope not.
He'd be a solo artist.
No, but all of my children are very creative
Okay.
and talented, and so the boys both picked up the music. They're both artists, so I paint,
Okay.
I write, I sing. I'm just like a creative.
Cluster ball.
Yeah, So
And it's sprinkled to the kids.
it's sprinkled right down in them. That's what unicorns
They
do.
see it. Do they feel it or see it, or was it a natural transition for them?
It's natural.
Okay.
It's natural. So like in the morning time, when I was young and going to school, so I was working full time at the DOE, and I was going to school for my bachelor's, and I had 4 little babies, all under the age of 6.
Okay.
And so my morning routine, I would wake them up singing to them.
Got you.
So they don't know anything outside of being in an environment that's just really singing and laughing and joking. And we're comedy.
Okay.
It's funny.
So y'all walking reality too.
We are. We are. We've been approached about that. It was a time that I had 10 kids in the house.
Okay.
I had to take in my 4 nieces. And so I had my 4 daughters, my 4 nieces, and my 2 sons, and 2 dogs. It was a reality show.
That's a heavy bill.
What? and I was running a nonprofit here in Brooklyn for people that were coming out of incarceration. I was running the Queendom. I was doing events. So I live a very high-strung life.
Okay.
You know, and it's all purpose-driven at this point.
I got you. And it's all because you believe in God.
I would say that his belief in me allows it to happen, because sometimes my belief is not so great.
Well, we have those moments.
Yeah, we do. We definitely do. I think that most people aren't transparent about it. I feel like sometimes we get in a posture, especially in the believer community, we get in a posture where we believe that we have to pretend as if we feel this all the time.
Right.
And I think there's a clear distinction between faith and belief and then reality.
Right.
And so oftentimes, and this is I think why a lot of non-believers don't prescribe to Jesus and they don't prescribe to a relationship with God, because there's this facade that's put up that like, I'm impenetrable, I believe, and God got me, and God is good all the time.
Right.
And it comes across very
It's that
phony.
mask.
It's a mask. And me as a survivor of domestic violence, I can't wear masks for anybody.
Right.
And so we all struggle day to day with our fundamental belief system, because beliefs are constantly evolving. And so the Bible and Christianity is a reference point on where we go back to. It's kind of like that relationship I said with my children. I always want them to be able to come back to it.
Right.
Not that they're not going to go make mistakes, or they're not going to live a life that might not be what I want them to live.
Okay.
But I want them to come back. And I feel like that's how God feels about us. He just wants us to come check in, you know. So
Give him his love, give him his praise.
yeah.
Jumping into what you said, domestic violence. In that situation, I know you can't speak for all women. How hard is it to pull yourself out of the situation? And when I say pull out, you may have to pack some things, 1 or 2 items, your feelings, your heart, and in your case, children. Is it hard to just pull everything out, or say, you know what, let me stick it out? What's the tug of war in the mind state that you would be in, or one would be in?
You know, I think that the hard part is unpacking the trauma that allowed you to get there in the first place.
Okay.
Right? Because for me, I have been in multiple relationships that led to domestic violence. The last one, 12 years of abuse, and I left so many times I can't even count.
Okay.
Right? So packing up, starting new, and for me, having a career and an education and ability to create income and economics, that wasn't my burden. That wasn't the struggle. The struggle was the fact that I couldn't understand why this was happening to me.
Okay.
Instead of understanding that I'm allowing this to happen. What is inside of me that needs to change to stop this from allowing, you know? And so I went through the cycle. The cycle of abuse is usually about 7 times.
Okay.
So a woman may be verbally, physically, sexually assaulted the first time. You're probably not going to hear about it till about the 5th time.
Okay.
And then she'll probably go back, and then she'll leave again, and then she'll go back, and if she's lucky enough, she'll get to leave again for that 7th time. A lot of women don't make it to the 7th time.
So when we talk about domestic violence, signs, not just physical, what are some of the signs that we can possibly look for, if any, that a woman or a gentleman may be going through domestic violence?
The constant need for validation, always apologizing. You ever met someone that if you're, let's say, coming out the door at the same time as them, they're like, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Just overly apologetic, not being able to make eye contact. avoiding social situations so that doesn't create conflict.
Okay.
Just being isolated. So I had this huge career and a big public life, but I would isolate myself. And so, because I knew that the more interactions I had, the more likely it would cause conflict.
Okay.
And so, isolation from the family, isolation from social things, and you only go out when necessary. And I find that the most happiest people are usually the ones underlyingly that are going through the most stuff.
Okay.
And so I wore a mask for many years where I show up and I smile and, you know, how's everybody? Everybody needs something. I always needed to make sure everybody needed something, what needed to happen, because I tried to avoid conflict at all costs because I knew there was a conflict I couldn't avoid.
Okay, so there was conflict. Well, don't go hang out with your family, don't go to the cookout, don't dress that way, don't look that way, or don't talk to this individual.
Yeah.
It was pretty much those ranges.
Yeah. And then sometimes I would find myself being overly aggressive in situations that weren't aggressive or having like a really inappropriate response to a situation.
Okay.
Not really knowing how to, if someone says something and maybe instead of responding and being able to say, well, I don't understand what you mean, or explain it, I would get offended or I would get upset because I felt like I was always being attacked.
Okay. So you stayed on the defensive.
Always on the
regardless.
defensive.
And you say you were overly aggressive. Would it be the coworkers, children, family, anyone that you came in contact with?
Anything that looked like
Could potentially cause
could
conflict
cause me,
at
right?
home.
Yeah, yeah.
I
At
got
home
you.
or cause me like harm to myself. I was
Okay.
very protective of my image and protective of what you say to me. You're not gonna say this to me. You're not
Right.
gonna. And that I feel like a lot of people rebirth that experience even when they're no longer in it.
Okay.
And so that's a sign that either a person is in it or they've gone through certain things.
Gotcha. Now with domestic violence and parenting, children sometimes hear it, see it, witness it. How is that as a parent? Is it a pounding on you like, okay, I'm putting my children through this? How are my children looking at me? How are they feeling? The effects of it, the long-term effects, not just the short. How did you mentally deal with that?
It's so interesting because I never wanted to be like my mother, right?
Okay.
So my father beat my mother their whole marriage, right? And I never wanted to be like my mother where I felt like she didn't protect us.
Okay.
And so I would find myself in a situation, violence begins, I'm out, right? And then, so the first relationship, it was violence, and then I was like, okay, I'm out. It took me a little minute to catch my breath.
Okay.
I remember the first time I was assaulted, my oldest was 1 and my youngest was like 2 months. And I was arguing about cab money for getting the kids to the hospital. They had fevers. He was like, I'm going out. And I was like, I need to get the kids to the hospital. And you always, da 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 da. It ended up being this big argument. And I'm like, no, I need to take the kids to the hospital. And I remember he slammed me into a wall. My ears were ringing. I'm like, it was like a shocking kind of situation. And my ears were ringing. And so he went to walk out the door, and I locked the chain the door behind him. And he unlocked the door and broke the chain and threw me into a futon. Broke the futon with me. And it was like I was so defeated. I was scared. And I ran in the back with the 2 babies because they're in the crib. And I'm like, I locked the door and I ran in the back and I called my mom. And I was hysterical. And she's like, how hurt are you? And I was like, I'm all right. And she said, you got the rent money? I said, no. She said, can you feed those kids? I said, no. And she said, well, you better figure it out. And so that first introductory experience to domestic violence and the response I got made me feel like, how do I balance? Because I have 2 new babies. How do I just leave?
Right.
Because the reality is that I didn't want to go to a homeless shelter. I wasn't homeless.
Right.
I had a nice home. But I didn't want to be there anymore. I felt unsafe. And so I tried to work it out for the sake of the kids. And then within about 6 months to the year, I was like, yeah, I'd rather be homeless and hungry.
Right.
Because I'm out. It's not going to work out. And so I went from that situation to another situation that ended up domestic violence. And I don't think that was so much malicious. I feel like it was a lot of ego. At that time, I was developing as a a person, as a woman. And when I first met my ex-husband, we had a relationship where he was more like a father figure, and he was teaching me things. A lot of stuff I didn't learn in childhood. And so I had these 2 more babies, and now I have 4 babies, and I'm going to school, and it was a struggle for a while, and then it was like a light at the end of the tunnel. I started getting phone calls from NBC and CBS and the Robin Hood Foundation. I'm raising up to leadership in the DOE, and I'm the president of Metropolitan College, and I have all of these things happening, and he still was where he was at when we first met. And so the power and control of I'm a man and I should lead became, I believe, and this is my belief, overwhelming to him. And so in order to exert that dominancy of man, which society puts out there, that toxic masculinity, it got violent between us. And so when he hit me, it was like, oh, this can't happen. Because I had already left the previous relationship. So if I left that situation, I'm gonna leave this situation. And so when I left that situation, it was like, okay, build yourself up, focus on yourself, date. I never really dated. Date, focus on yourself. And I met my 2 youngest children's father, and by that point, I was so broken down because I never dealt with the effects of being assaulted. I never dealt with the trauma of having to pick up these children and go. I just did, right? And so when I got to that dynamic, it was like, all men do this. So why leave? Why leave again? And so I would leave for safety, but I never left him.
Just put a little distance.
Just put a little space. Sometimes
you
it was
can't
a couple states.
You can't touch me over here.
All right. I mean, sometimes it was a couple of states, you know, because I left New York to go to Virginia, and he was almost wanted posters. But every time I left the door open because I felt like that's just what men do.
We need to breathe.
My father did it. My grandfather did it. Every man that I've been with, in a relationship with, they've done it. So just make sure it doesn't get so far that it kills you.
Did you ever sit down and say, God, or to yourself, is there something in me that keep attracting these type of men? Or is there something in me that keeps allowing it because I saw it, I experienced it, and I'm praying that it stops, praying that it gets better? Did you ever stop and say, you know what, I'm part of the problem? Maybe 10%, 90%, because there's definitely something wrong with the man being abusive. But did you ever beat yourself down? Did you ever point yourself?
I was violent.
You fought back? Or did you start?
I would start some stuff. I was violent. You know, I think we have to be honest with ourselves, and I'm a very transparent person because that's what healing requires. Healing requires that you own your experience, right? And so there was a violence that was inside of me from my mother's womb. My father assaulted my mother while she was pregnant with me. There was a violence that was inside of me. I grew up in the hood. I grew up in Left Rack City during the crack era and in South Jamaica. It's all I saw around me. And sometimes we kind of feel like women are removed from the experience because we're women. The same experiences that shape a 50 Cent shape a Corrine. It's just that we manifest it differently, right? Men may go out in the streets and sell drugs or get guns, and it's like, oh, they went through a traumatized experience. A woman will go and she will deal with a man who's like that. So I never questioned myself as to why. It was obvious. The problem was, for me, was why I couldn't see who I was. That was the issue. So when like my godmother used to be like, why do you date these felons? And I was like, every man that I've ever known is a felon. Every man I've ever known is a felon. Like, you know, so it's like if your father was a banker, you probably date a banker. The personality connections are going to be relative to those experiences that shape you. And so what shaped me was being around gangsters, being around, you know, my family had been notorious. And so that's what I was raised around. I saw these men and they were all abusive. You know, that's part of, you know, the drug abuse, alcohol abuse, the lifestyle, they were all abused, the environment. And so I never really wondered why I had these men, or I attracted these men. I think when I discovered who I was, it became, why could I never see me? That was the question. Not that no woman deserves to be abused, right? But it's far more likely for women in certain states of being to, you know, if you look at me, I walk in a room, I'm confident, you know, people find me attractive, I'm educated, I'm articulate. Why would you allow this 6th grade dropout to beat on you?
Right.
Because I didn't see me. I saw a mirror reflection of me in his trauma.
Right.
His trauma looked like my trauma.
Hurt, love, and hurt.
That's it.
Right. And hurt people.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I don't cut you off. Go ahead.
And so, you know, the connection was not about, the connections were not about the aesthetics. It wasn't about what he looks like, or what I look like, or his job title, or my job title, or any of that. The connection was the trauma bond.
Gotcha.
I didn't have to explain to you what it's like for your Christmas to be stolen because your parents moved back.
Right.
Because
we
went
related.
through that, right? I didn't have to when I get, you know, upset and I start talking with my hands and, you know, like I'm ready to fight in the street because somebody done bumped into me too hard or whatever.
Right.
I don't have to explain that part of me that is the lesser part of me because you get it. You want pop too.
Right.
It wasn't until I really started to evolve and have a relationship with God that I was like, that's not who I am.
Right.
And so that's where the conflict and abuse became more prevalent because ultimately it's like, wait a minute, you're trying to be somebody different.
Okay.
I remember when I shot at my baby father, he had hit me in my face. My face was like down here. And I was like, oh, that's what we're doing today? And I went and got a gun and I shot him. Any normal person would have been like, okay, I'm either leaving or calling the police.
Right.
He was like, he was like, well, maybe it's a gangster.
Yeah, I turned him on.
Okay. And so, you know, these experiences are so shaped in abnormality and dysfunction that it seems normal. And so because everything in my life had been dysfunctional, I attract dysfunction and dysfunctional people.
Right.
And it felt comfortable. And so when I built my relationship with God, the things that felt comfortable began to feel uncomfortable.
Right.
And the abuse got worse.
Gotcha. So tell us about any transformation work that you may have done, going through everything you have gone through and survived.
Yes. So in the process of this, you know, conscious transformation, I have done trauma-informed therapy. A lot of my work is biblical worldview based. And so I look at the story of Ruth, not to find Boaz, but to find Ruth, right? Or to find Naomi. And to find out how these biblical principles allow us to change.